All right, Zig coming in on the top. Today on the show, we have an epic one, Jeff Lang. Jeff Lang is an Australian guitarist, vocalist, singer, songwriter, and producer, as well as a kind, thought-provoking, insightful individual. Also, Jeff happens to be one of my guitar heroes. So this was a big one for me. Also, it's a very guitar nerdy conversation and songwriter nerdy conversation for those who are about to enter. So beware. Jeff has a new album out called More Life. It's a duet record, so in which he writes and collaborates with every artist on the record. He does duets with John Butler, Don Walker, Debashis Bhattacharya, just to name a few. I came across Jeff's music in a roundabout way. My cousin, when I was younger, showed me John Butler's record, Sunrise Over Sea, and I got really into this idea that, whoa, I can take everything I know on guitar and apply it to other instruments like banjo and lap steel and ukulele and just other string things. It just kind of clicked. Oh, I know stuff that can be applied elsewhere. And it kind of opened up this whole door of creativity and like excitement and like an expansiveness to this thing called music I was learning, not guitar, but now music. And going down the rabbit hole of trying to learn how to adapt these things on different instruments, I would listen to interviews, one of which I listened to with John Butler, and he showed this picking pattern he learned from this guy, Jeff Lang. And so I had to look up who Jeff Lang was and fell into that rabbit hole. And I was like, oh, I see where it comes from now. This is incredible. Not only as a guitarist and multi-strung instrumentalist, but as a songwriter, just opened my mind in so many different ways. And in a lot of ways, this kind of expansiveness is what really made me want to write songs and learn how to write songs. Anyway, so I'm excited to share this conversation. Before we get to that, we're going to listen to a track off Jeff's new record, More Life. This is the song Seek High, featuring John Butler, off Jeff Lang's new record, More Life. Seek High, Jeff Lang and John Butler, off Jeff Lang's new record, More Life. Available now on all streaming platforms. Do yourself a favor, check out the record. It's packed with thought-provoking song and inspired musicality. All right, before we get to this conversation, I got to tell you about what's coming up next, because if you're listening to this one, I have a feeling you are a guitar nerd like me, and you'll be interested in the next episode, which features Arlen Roth, master of the Telecaster, a pioneer in guitar education. His Hot Licks video series featured mega guitar players like Danny Gatton, Eric Johnson, Joe Bonamassa, Brett Mason, just to name a few, right? And it's a video series in which you get to sit down with these guys and they give you a lesson. And it was the first of its kind. So Arlen has also been a guy who's played with everybody from Bob Dylan to Simon and Garfunkel. So if you dig this type of stuff, you might want to check out next week as well. Lastly, if you hear what you like, if you can like, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast on any of the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking to cool guests like Jeff and sharing their insight with you. And without further ado, we're going to turn it over to Jeff Lang.
Yeah. Hey, yeah, so Cleveland, man. I know the Beachland Tavern Ballroom well.
Oh, yeah? Nice.
Yeah.
Any
plans? It's been a while since I've been there. Yeah, I've played there a few times.
Awesome. Any plans of playing there soon with this next out release?
Well, look, I'd love to say yes. There's no plans imminent. It's been a while. Like as soon as our daughter was born in 2007, and I took the foot off the gas when it came to touring North America, because I just knew that there's a certain amount of time a year that you have to dedicate to being on the road in the States to make it at all viable and to make people even want to book you for a run. Right. It just didn't work saying to them, look, I can come out for 3 weeks maximum at a time, maybe twice a year. It just didn't cut it. And I just kind of went, look, that's probably off the cards for a while. So, a lot of the stuff I did, gigging wise in the early 2000s, late 90s to early 2000s, mid 2000s. It's, might have died on the vine. Some of the venues wouldn't even be there anymore. But, that's just one of those things you do when you have a family and want them to know you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I totally relate to, like, you establish these connections and you start to, like, nurture a relationship, a business relationship with you playing at this venue. And, like, 2020 wrecked a lot for us as far as touring. So, you know, like, definitely is. It's something you got to keep watering.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah, and I do in the ways that I can. But yeah, like I said, I think. I mean, in reality, touring the US, I think there's something about the psychology of the American mindset. It kind of demands that you give yourself completely, like like move here,
Yeah.
and then we'll, show us that you're really dedicated to us first and foremost. This isn't a bad thing either.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fair enough because there's just so many people and there's so much, the musical culture is so strong. They kind of know that they're at the center of the world as far as the music business is concerned. So they're kind of like, look, show us that you're serious, and then we'll take you seriously and possibly reject you. So I mean, I spent a good 9 months of the year for a few years there touring the States, but I was well aware even at the time that that's not really enough.
Yeah.
I never considered moving there. I was always going to be living in this weird little outpost at the edge of the Western world here in Australia.
To kind of jump into this, the first question I wanted to ask you about, because I really related to your origin with it, if you can tell me about your sister's nylon acoustic guitar.
Yeah, that's how I first got my hands on a guitar. I mean, to sort of put it in the context of where I was at, I'd been playing clarinet for 6 years. Our parents didn't play music themselves. My mum dabbled a little bit with sight reading on the piano, but she didn't play very much. I can't remember her playing that much at home. But she encouraged us at least to play an instrument. So my younger sister was playing flute for a while and piano for a while. My older sister tried guitar for a little while. And when she started high school, she only played it for a year or so, and she just set it aside and went, I don't want to really care about doing this. I've been playing the clarinet, but as soon as I saw these three clips in quick succession on a TV show, and I'd grown up around a lot of guitar music. My dad was a fan of Ry Cooder, Leo Kottke, Bob Dylan, Eric Clapton, Roy Buchanan. So I'd heard a lot of guitar music, but I saw on this one show, one after the other, there was Led Zeppelin's Black Dog from Madison Square Garden. There was AC/DC's You Shook Me All Night Long. And there was an Australian band called Cold Chisel who never really cracked it overseas, but they were a great rock band. And there was a song of theirs called You Got Nothing I Want. And it was a very Stonesy kind of song. And those three back to back, I just went, oh, I want to do that. That looks like fun. So next thing was commandeering my older sister's discarded nylon string acoustic guitar, which obviously wasn't what I was really hoping for. I wanted an electric guitar. So I had to go and get a job, after school job, to save up money to get my own electric guitar. But in the meanwhile, I had this discarded guitar that I was not allowed to touch either. She, even though she didn't want to play it, she was like, that's mine, hands off, younger brother. So I had to kind of secret it away in my room and play it as quietly as I could so she didn't discover that I was touching her instrument. But yeah, it had two broken, I guess the thing that's kind of helped kind of in a roundabout way lead to whatever my guitar style is it had two broken tuning buttons. Like the button on the tuning pegs were broken off. And so you just had the metal stick and you couldn't turn them. But those two strings sounded okay next to each other. They're in some kind of relationship that, it's like either the A string or the D string and the B string buttons were missing. But they sounded okay next to each other. And so I just kind of twisted the other ones around by ear until it sounded okay. And then I played like that. Even when I got an electric guitar, I kind of tuned it, referencing it to this half-broken guitar. And I played like that for about a couple of years, I think, before I kind of, explored standard guitar tuning, because I knew that people didn't tune the guitar the way I was generally, and I felt like it was kind of illegitimate. I felt a little bit embarrassed about it, and I didn't want anyone who played proper guitar to discover that I had it in a wrong tuning. So, but it was kind of like an open C chord, a C5 chord. It sort of had a low C, a G, C, and then the G string was down to C as well in unison, then another G, then a C. I worked out years later. So it was like they were all really floppy. I mean, I would hate to hear it. It would have probably been, the intonation would have been suspect at best. But yeah, I started like that, and so I've always kind of used open tunings, and I don't use it the same as an open tuning if I play in standard, but it's still the way I kind of view the neck. It kind of is. It's not very different to how I view it in an open tuning. The way you work up and down any string, the way you work across the strings, it all, the grids. It doesn't, to me, feel very different.
Okay. Because, like, so when you were first kind of dabbling with that, was the grid, did that become clear to you through, like, experimenting? Or was that, like, years later?
I think just experimenting, that sort of way of having a picture of the whole neck, it kind of, I mean, I can't pretend that it was there all the time, but I don't remember a particular light bulb moment where that came into focus for me. It just sort of gradually, through being interested, I think, obsessed, probably more than even just interested. I was obsessed with playing, obsessed with experimenting with it and just finding things. And so I was an ear player. I was just self-taught by ear. I got some guitar lessons off someone for a while, but they were after I'd been playing for a while. And he was actually just kind of helping me get up to speed on standard tuning to where I already was at with open tuning, and just showing a few extra things as well. And those lessons that went on for a few months, they became almost like music appreciation sort of sessions where he had a prized thing, which at the time was a double cassette deck. So he would sort of, I'd say, oh, I really like Jimmy Page. He said, oh, have you heard Jeff Beck? Like, no. He'd go, here. And he'd chuck on his double cassette deck. I'd bring my cassette that I had previously, have it queued up to the right spot, and he would dub me off, You Know What I Mean, off Blow by Blow. And so he'd go, check this out. This is Jeff Beck. He'd go, have you heard Neil Young? I'd go, no. He'd say, here. He'd dub off Like a Hurricane. And, so that's kind of where those music, guitar lessons were for a lot of the time, was talking about music and him spinning me off some extra players to listen to, all kinds of things that, like Alan Holdsworth, and all manner of stuff.
It is interesting with, like, for kind of like lessons like that. Part of that is that kind of exchange of, like, oh, you don't know. And, like, because I relate to that on both ends, like as a teacher and like taking lessons as a kid, like, wait, who's this? You know what I mean? Like, because you get that first tune and you're like, oh my God, Jeff Beck plays with the whammy bar like this. You know what I mean? It's like,
like Neil Young plays like that. Wow. Okay. That Neil Young, that really knocked me out when I first heard Neil Young, because it was almost like a lot of the sounds that players might use, might try and excise from their playing, like I'll get things cleaner or get things more accurate. He seemed to, those sounds that you might try and expel from your playing with practice, he kind of embraced them and kind of leaned into them. And also just that sense of melody. Like, that's one of the things I love about Neil Young's electric lead playing is he doesn't play guitar licks. There's no licks. It's all melody with a killer sound. And so his instrument just always sings. So, it's not technical, but it's got that wild edge too. Like, the ideas are just kind of being ripped through him. So yeah, that had a real impact.
So, cause like I just kind of had a breakthrough with like open tuning, and like kind of realized like how basically like you have this pattern up until the third of whatever tuning you're playing, right? Like if you're playing an open C, that E. So you kind of have like a pretty like stagnant pattern across the neck until that E, and then you have to kind of shift it. You know what I mean? For like a
it depends where the third falls in a tune. If you've got a tuning with a third too, because not all of them do.
Yeah.
But if you do have a tuning with a third, where is the third in the tuning? You could have an open C tuning, which I guess the most common one would be, root 5, root, then third on top.
Yes. Yeah.
The E's on the top string. But then you might do it the sort of more slack key version where it's like an open D pattern. So the third's in the middle of the neck. So you got C, G, C, E, G, C. And so that's that type. That's more a bluesy one. The other one's more a Hawaiian tuning. And then the third in the middle is more a blues tuning. It's like open D, but down a step. So the patterns then shift depending on where that close interval is. You know, I've got certain tunings where I'll have, say, instead of a third, I'll have the second interval in the middle of the chord, and then maybe a dominant seventh on the top, like a flat seven. So it'll go root 5, root, second 5, flat 7.
Huh.
So then again, there's a whole other pattern. So it kind of, if you have a major third, that's one thing. Where is the third in the tuning? Is it in the middle? Is it at the top? And then is it even a third? So, you know, it's not really something I would say, yes, that's a consistent rule. You have a stagnant pattern up until you get to that third, because you might have a certain pattern across the strings. Yes, that's true. If you've got like the open C with the third in the middle of it, then yes, you'll have a certain pattern on the bottom 3 strings. The first string you'll go up to, you know, if you're in a major scale, 2nd fret, 4th fret, 5th fret, 7th fret is the same as the open. Mm-hmm. That'll be the same. You know, first open, 2nd fret, 4th fret, and then the 5th fret is the same as the open, and then the next string's an octave at the lowest one, so the pattern repeats. Then you've got the third in the middle. So, you know, I think the way, if anyone was looking at an open tuning and wanted to not just feel locked to either just barring chords and playing around certain fret positions, you know, like there's certain fret positions if you're playing slide that are easy go-to positions: 3rd fret, 5th fret, 10th fret, 12th fret.
Yeah.
You can play things in those positions and just slam the chord down. But if you want to actually unlock the whole thing, I would say pick with each string, just go up the string all the way to the 12th fret and just work out where the notes are that are in a given mode.
Yeah.
If you're straight major, if you're minor, Dorian minor, Aeolian minor, whichever, these notes that's on that string in that key all the way to the 12th fret, and then it just repeats again. Then do the same thing with the next string up, bearing in mind that you're not changing key. You know, if you're playing in that open C, your lowest strings is your root note. Next one is the 5th of the interval. So you're starting with a G, but still keep in mind that you're playing in the key of C, and do the same thing all the way up. Same thing on every string. And once you have that locked into your head, then you know where all the notes in key are for every string all the way up, because it goes to the 12th fret, then it repeats. So you basically know where all the notes are for that mode anywhere on the neck. Then you start playing things that go from string to string. So you can go down from, you know, you're playing you then go, say, from the 12th fret down on the top string. Where does, you know, when it gets to the 7th fret, that's where there's the overlap with the 12th fret on the B string, on the second string. So then you start working out where patterns interlock. Well, pretty soon, if you work at that stuff, you can go anywhere on the neck. You can finish any phrase going across the strings or down. So you're kind of free. You're as free as you might be if you knew the neck in standard tuning. And so it's that way of unlocking the neck for yourself. So you don't feel like that you're locked into one key because you're playing in an open tuning, because it needn't be. If you're in an open C, it doesn't mean you have to play in the key of C. You know, that tuning works really well for playing in the key of G. It also works really well for playing in the key of A minor, for example. So, yeah, these are things that, you know, you can sort of work out and just sort of help unlock the potential in the guitar with that tuning, instead of, you know, for people who are experimenting with it. It's fun to sort of look beyond just, I'm in open C, that means I play in C.
Right. Oh my God, that makes me feel so good hearing that from you, because that's what I've been doing for years. Like, running it like that.
Yeah. That's cool.
But so to build back off where we kind of left off with, was this the teacher that also had the reel-to-reel player that let you like record some of your own tunes in between his lessons?
No, that was my clarinet teacher.
Oh, okay, okay.
Before then, yeah, he was really he had a real good effect for me because he did two things. He encouraged me to improvise. So he taught with a sort of graded system and sight reading and things like that. And he must have recognized. I mean, I was pretty young. It's like started playing clarinet when I was 8. So, but he recognized in me that maybe the thing to do would be encourage improvisation. So he'd make me these things that I called. When I'm thinking back on it later, I call them my jazz karaoke tapes. He'd like have a sort of a pretty cheesy, corny sounding backing band, like a piano, bass, and drums doing Satin Doll. And he'd give me the music for the head of the tune. So here's the head, can you read that for me and play it? Okay, so that's how it fits in. Now, it'll go through, another dozen times on this tape. Just make things up and just experiment with it. And then when you come back next week, play me some stuff and show me the sorts of things that you've been, making up off the top of your head. Play like that for me, and we'll, sort of critique it. He didn't really use that word, but he'd critique it and sort of suggest things that would help me to open up, unlock more possibilities out of it. So that was really cool, having someone who just encouraged improvisation. He seemed to recognize that I might have a bent towards that. And the other thing was, he had a reel-to-reel machine in the studio there that he at the university that he taught at, and he'd say, while you wait for your dad to come, I'll do a lesson in the other room, and if you want to muck around with this, go for it. So, which was awesome. Again, I don't know why he twigged that I was interested in that, but he did, and he even, and I remember even at one point he'd sort of told my folks, and they sort of did a, check up after a year or so of how I was going. He talking about what I was good at with playing and what level I was kind of at, even though he wasn't sort of officially grading me because he'd kind of abandoned that with me. But he also said to him, and he's got a very good understanding of how recording equipment works, that at a young age, it just seemed to make sense. So that was really cool to have someone actually just encourage that and recognize it and encourage it was cool.
Right. No, that's super impactful. Did playing clarinet kind of like give you this ear for melody that maybe you find like in playing slide?
Probably, yeah. I mean, I didn't have any clarinet influences because you just didn't hear it. And that's probably part of the reason why when I saw those, rock and roll clips that were contemporaries, I went, oh, guitar, I want to do that. Because guitar music was everywhere and it's a seductive kind of sound. So, yeah, but I think you're probably right. When I'm playing melody on guitar, like a solo or whatever, it's good to remember to think like a singer or a horn player, like they have to take a breath. And that then gives the audience a chance to take a breath. You know yourself, the guitar, you can just play endless melody with no gaps if you let yourself. So it's nice to think of lines and where a breath might be, because that actually does give the audience a chance to digest it a bit. Because it can be fatiguing and a bit exhausting if someone just plays a barrage at you endlessly. And I've been guilty of that, no doubt. Probably guilty at it at my most recent gig at times, but I try to remember that.
Well, it's one of those things. It's like it's part of the charm of guitar is the shreddiness. You know what I mean? Like you got to remember I got to remember to music it. It's music. We all need breath in it. You got to hear what you just said.
In practicing, I think it's been a good thing to sort of go, what might Aretha Franklin play? Sing. What might she sing? Mm-hmm. Play that. What might Miles Davis play here? Try and lean towards that. You'll never, knowing that I'll never make the lap steel sound like a trumpet. But if I can lean into his phrasing and his, what I imagine his thought process might be, then I might end up with something that's not so strictly idiomatic. Because, something like lap steel, you can quickly fall into idiomatic lines that sound like a lot of other stuff that you've heard. So it can be good to, what might a set of Uilleann pipes play on this? I've got a lap steel, but if I can try and articulate something that's like the Irish pipes, then I might get something that's intriguing to the ear.
Yeah, well, it can drone it like that too. That Well, I think that's a really like inspiring, like kind of like way to bring more than just like the instrument. You bring music to life for a musician.
Yeah, because like it's like you sort of identified with the guitar, it can lead to sort of it's like a tightening circle in a way of if you just have guitar influences, you can't remember them properly. So I mean, I think anyone's guitar style, it comes from listening to stuff and you remember half of it, forget half, and then the half you remember you get wrong. And that becomes your sort of style. But if you just listen to guitar players, then you're only remembering half of it and you're getting it sort of wrong, which can be interesting. But if you just keep listening only to guitar, it feels like it's a constricting circle of influence. Whereas if you listen to other things, I'm not saying that it necessarily works and makes my playing interesting, but I think it holds potential to sort of expand the possibilities for the instrument.
I definitely think those are wise words for sure. And like,
I've heard people do it. Richard Thompson does it.
Yeah.
He sounds like a mixture of James Burton, a set of bagpipes, and John Coltrane, and a dervish dancer. Like it doesn't sound like he doesn't play anyone else's guitar licks in a improvised solo. He goes off into his own area, and so it's fascinating. So it can be done.
He came through town like a month ago and I didn't realize it till post. And I'm like, that would have been sweet to see like one of the greatest songwriters.
He's such a great player as well. But yeah, the songs, man, he's so great.
One other early question I have. Can you tell me about Ron from Music Workshop?
Oh, Rod Ho.
Rod.
Yeah. He was a drummer. He was one of those guys, man. Like when I first met him, he owned 12 drum kits. He just played in a local bar band, but he had 12 drum kits and he had like a bunch of guitars and amps. And he did a pretty passable impression of like Peter Green from Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, of his kind of version of he played licks from Peter Green songs, and it was like, that's pretty decent. He couldn't really do anything else, but yeah, he was really into it. But yeah, I used to, I'm not endorsing it, but I used to skive off from school and catch the bus into town and just go in and hang around in these guitar shops. And I'm sure it was pretty annoying. I'd always be, plugging in guitars and things that I had no means to pay for. And they were very good humoured and patient with me, and occasionally would say, "Shouldn't you be back at school by now?" I'd be like, should I? But I came in there one day and he said, "Hey, you play slide guitar. You might find a use for this." It was a Japanese Tiesco sort of. I still got it actually. It's a kind of ocean blue, bottle blue or bottle green blue sort of coloured lap steel, and two pickups, and they're pretty cool actually because they select a switch for each pickup. And in a lot of those old Japanese guitars, when you add the extra pickup, it's in series, so the sound gets fatter and louder. So that thing was I didn't really know, I hadn't heard anyone play lap steel, but it was like $40. It was really cheap, and so I went, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I'll put that on lay-by, and I just paid it off. And then I just started playing it. A little while later, the only exposure I had to anyone playing lap steel was actually the band U2 had a couple of things. There was like a Live at Red Rocks show that got played on TV, and anything that had guitar in it that was on TV, I'd be watching and picking up. And I remember seeing U2, and there was a bit where he played on top of his piano. He had a lap steel, and he played. It's pretty simple stuff, but it was in tune and musical. And then a little while later, I saw a clip of that Live at Pompeii by Pink Floyd, and there was a song on there that Dave Gilmour was playing lap steel. But neither of those things were the sort of style that I didn't sort of go, oh, I want to do that exact thing. I just I'd play Bottleneck. I was listening to Ry Cooder and Elmore James and a lot of blues stuff, like gospel stuff like Blind Willie Johnson and things like that, and trying to sort of figure out some of those things on Bottleneck. And so I'd be also trying to play those on lap steel. And a while later, I discovered players like David Lindley. That really, Lindley was he was the greatest.
So So like with kind of having this like open tuning like kind of background from the rip and then like approaching the lap steel, like it's such a different like approach to it because you're holding it down. Did it
Yeah, the
come kind of
physicality is
easy to
quite
you?
different. It felt weird at first, actually. I remember for the first while, I kind of was like, it feels strange, the physicality of having this thing, playing it like that as opposed to like that. Like your left hand, especially, it's just very different. You're approaching it from the bass side of the neck and it's flat. And it just felt strange and a bit alien. But at a certain point, I was living in Sydney when I was in my very early 20s, and there was a nice scene of bands around. It's the biggest city out here, so there was more players, and I discovered people that I got along with, and they'd have these sort of jam nights, and I would go along and they'd say, yeah, bring an instrument down, sit in with us. Or I'd open for someone and they'd say, hey, if you want to sit in with the band after, just play in our whole set. So I'd play a solo set opening on acoustic, but I'd bring along this electric lap steel and an amp, and I'd just sit in with the band. And I just thought, I like this thing, but I need to make it make sense for me physically. And so I just made myself play it a lot during gigs. Like, so sitting in with a band, I would just play the lap steel with them. And, it's in open E, but they'd be playing in all different keys. And so it's like, well, just work out what you're doing in every key. You're not even going to have another electric guitar on stage. You're just going to have to make this work for the whole 2 hours with this band. And knowing as well that I didn't have to carry the thing, I was sitting in with them. So it's their material. Someone else is singing. I just had to fit in. But that really helped the lap steel start to really make sense physically for me. Within a couple of months, the sort of the difference between them became an asset rather than a hindrance.
Have you always like kept it in E?
Usually, yeah. I'm usually in either open E or a variation of that. Like there's some songs that sort of harken back to that first tuning, like that C one with the unison pair. Sometimes I'll use a unison pair in the middle, so just be E B E E B E. I might tune the middle, the third string to an F sharp, so it'd be E B E F sharp B E, or have that dominant seventh, the flat seventh, sorry, at the top. So E B E F sharp B D. Okay. That'd be the main 4 tunings that I use for that.
Gotcha. Okay, because what a good way to like make that instrument make sense, because like to sit in behind, because like I find myself like when I was trying to learn lap steel, so to kind of like the first like lap steel player I really became aware of was Ben Harper and John Butler, and I went down the rabbit hole, right, and like through John Butler I got to you. I'm like, oh, this is where it's at,
right.
And like so I went down the Jeff Lang rabbit hole. And like I was working at
it's a smelly rabbit hole.
It's a daunting one, man. Like I'm so inspired by your music, but like I would
thanks, man.
work at Guitar Center. I worked at Guitar Center before I was teaching, and I had a lap steel, and I worked at the door. So when no one was coming through, I just would practice his lap steel, trying to make it make sense, And like
yeah, because there's one thing where if you're doing self-accompanying type of thing, then you're trying to sort of fill in with the low end underneath what you're doing. But I guess I kind of helped unlock the instrument for myself by sitting in with bands because, like I say, there was a bass player and other guitar players there. So nothing was kind of hinging the tonality of the piece and the guts of the piece. Like I could have not been there and it wouldn't have mattered one bit. So that was quite liberating to have a context where I could just play, listen to what the other guitar players were doing and go, okay, they're already doing those things. Find something else that will fit. And you have to try and do it on this thing that you're still slightly unfamiliar with. So, that was a good context. It kind of helped free it up. So then when I went to playing self-accompanying style on it, I could still picture the possibilities melodically and chordally to do that were based around playing with other people holding that stuff down. So, yeah.
So when it comes to self-accompanying, what is that more of the picking technique?
Yep. Yes. Yeah. A lot of that's a right hand. So much of guitar, obviously, I was going to say so much of the guitar in general is in the right hand, in the picking hand. left hand for a left-hand player. But yeah, lap steel, it's more evenly divided because the way you articulate any kind of melody is all in your left hand with the slide bar, because you basically the only things you can play, as you know, are open strings or things sounded with the slide. There's no shapes. You can't do any chord shapes or articulation. It's all just one finger. A metal finger that you can't bend. That's your key to any melody. So your left hand, what would normally be your picking hand, is very much tied in. But yeah, on regular guitar, I think the picking hand is a big key to it. It's all the personality. It's kind of like the left hand is what you know, the information, and the right hand is the personality. Is kind of the who you are part. But yeah, with the slide, with the lap slide, yeah, the right hand technique does. I'd strongly advocate for a finger style. If anyone's thinking of picking up lap steel, who's watching this or listening to it, do it without a flat pick, because then as soon as you have a flat pick, you've kind of turned what could be two picking digits into one, and you're also separate from the instrument. So you might want to use picks. Like I often, when I'm playing acoustic, I'll use a thumb pick and two finger picks. But yeah, just having the freedom to take care of the low end with your thumb and play stuff over on the treble strings with your fingers, it opens it up a little bit for a bit more of an orchestral approach. And then a lot of it, how you do that with the slide bar, then is, angling the slide, playing melody lines with the slide on a bit of an angle so the bass strings that are passing through underneath it don't get rattle and things. So I end up using a round nose bar for that reason, because you can kind of move around, like a pen almost, pointing at the string that you want to play, and you're just using the nose of the bar. If you use a bar that's got a straight edge, what I found is I end up butting it into the next string. If I'm moving from the bass strings up to the treble strings across a phrase, the hard edge of it will just keep butting into the next string. Whereas if you have a rounded end, it just rolls across it. And so, I've got used to that. It's possibly a technical flaw, because if I use a Stevens bar or something like that, I'd end up going, oh man, I run into all these problems.
Butting the strings above it.
Yeah. Because I learned with a like a Hawaiian, a bullet nose bar, like, what pedal steel guys would use.
Okay. I see. Yeah. Like I'm trying to, the one I got one that's like it does have a rounded front. I can't remember the brand of it, but I really
possibly
like that
the
one.
Shub Pierce. Because at the gigs, the Shub Pierce is what I use at gigs, because it has the grooves to hold it, but it has that rounded lip.
Yep.
So if I practice at home, I'll use a round bar, and then at a gig, I'll use that Shub Pierce bar, because if you're used to holding a round bar and then you get one with the grips on it, it's like, it feels like you're playing is that much easier.
Right.
So practice with it's like practicing with a bit of a handicap or something, and then you take the handicap off at the gig, and everything feels, as long as the weight's about the same, then it's easier to play at the gig, which I think is good. Make it a bit harder for yourself at practice.
Take the training weights off then you can really fly.
Yes. Yeah.
To kind of pick your brain about picking a little bit. So one of the rabbit holes when I first started diving into your music, I found a weird lesson John Butler gave on some forum, and like he's like, oh, I learned this picking technique from Jeff Lang, and I've been trying to figure it out. He rips through it, right? And I think I think like he does like he just kind of is like, oh, it's this, and then something else, and like I think what it was with thumb middle first. This was like just on a regular guitar for doing like some type of run going up, and now which would be kind of like a forward roll in a way, but I don't know if that's it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of thing, like if I had the instrument, I might play something and you go, what was that? Whereas when you actually ask me, I go, I'm not sure what I do. A lot of it just it ends up being pragmatic.
Yeah.
And there's things where, I mean, there are definitely technical limitations to some of the things that I have naturally gravitated towards if I'm playing. I mean, I've played with Hawaiian players there's a certain roll they do. It's a triplet roll.
Okay.
And they're really fluent, and they can go up one string, and it's this like, they do these rolls at the start of a phrase, and it's really impressive. And I can't do that because I would have to sit there and just, on one string, learn that picking pattern because I just have never done it. And it doesn't come naturally. The way I play, it doesn't lend itself to a long string of staccato notes like that. I could do, short bursts of it, but they're usually broken up. So yeah, so I'm not sure exactly what he was talking about. I'm sorry, but yeah, I mean, if someone wanted to explore that, listen to some of the Hawaiian players like Sol Hupi, King Benny Nawahi. Yeah, they were really great at those rolls, those triplet rolls that are smooth and seamless.
So-
I can't do that.
So I guess what lap steel wise with finger picking, what do you find yourself kind of naturally doing? The thumb kind of alternating on the bass, and
Yeah, well, because I use a thumb pick, you can actually do something where you can kind of even go backwards and forwards on one string. That comes from playing without picks too. In fact, I only really added the picks because when you're playing at a gig, like after playing, I was always using bare fingers on electric steel. But when I went to playing acoustic steel and dobro and things at the gigs, I found that there was a bit of a problem with trying to get any velocity. It's not like you always want to play loud, but if you wanted to get a bit of extra propulsion into it, there's no gravitational assistance you get with it. Like if you're playing regular guitar and you want to give it a bit of extra muscle, you can always do a down blast. Even with your bare fingers, you can go back of the nail, down blast. You've got gravity that kind of helps you push into it and give it a bit of a push. You try to do that with lap steel, all the picking is up and across. There's no down. And you find yourself, if you want to kind of muscle it a bit, you can't. It feels like you're almost going to push your hand through the strings into the sound hole. It just feels messy and spongy. And so someone suggested try finger picks and a thumb pick. That might help. And it did. And actually what it did help with is you can play as soft as you like too. And it's not like then you just play hard all the time. It just means that you've got wider dynamic range. You can go super gentle with them and play up closer to the neck and get a sweet, gentle tone. And then if you want to sort of make it push a bit more, you actually can rip into it a little bit more and get some more push. So I ended up going with the picks. So yeah, but you can do that sort of thing with the bass strings. You kind of, on the bass strings and play over it with the fingers. What I end up, I don't really divide it up though, bass strings with the thumb, treble strings with the fingers. It ends up being a thing where sometimes, depending on the riff, again, just through pragmatic technique, I might have certain things that I will bring the fingers across to the bass strings to articulate certain lines. And also in playing treble things, the thumb will kind of drift over to the treble strings to articulate something. So it's not strictly divided, but if you were going to have a general rule, it would be that the thumb is kind of concentrating more on the low end and the fingers are more on the high end. But like I say, they kind of blur that line at times depending on the pragmatism of how to articulate a certain phrase. It's like I can't actually get that rhythmic feel. A lot of it is that thing with a rhythmic feel. If I'm playing something with in the treble register with the fingers and I want the note, the phrase to have a certain bounce to it, the only way to get that is to kind of almost stop the string with your thumb to play the next note. It will have a little break in the rhythm. So instead of it being like da 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 da, it'll be ba ba da da. It just gives it a little lilt, a little sort of swing. And so those are the sort of decisions that are kind of made on the fly about when you bring the thumb over to the treble. Likewise with the bass, if I'm doing something in the bass register, I'll generally be using the thumb, but there might be a certain thing that requires playing with the fingers. There's certain rhythmic phrases that you can't get the same, if it's sort of a, dunk, 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 dunk. I can't get that just doing it with my thumb. I'd have to be like sort of bass, two fingers, to sort of do the dunk, 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 boom, dunk, dunk, dunk. And that sort of thing comes from listening to how David Lindley played the Weizenborn. He's a great rhythm player on it. No one really had a right hand like his. He would use three picks and a thumb pick, and he had this amazing kind of flapping his hand like a paddle. And I don't do the same thing, but I hear that and I go, yeah, that's definitely had an influence in playing certain rhythm licks on the acoustic steel. I mean, he's a big influence.
That answers like so many questions I've spent watching videos of you playing, trying to figure out what you're doing with those fingers on the picking hand. But that makes
Yeah, because
sense.
it's sort of blurred lines,
Yeah.
and there's a general, like I said, there's a general kind of division of labor, but draft in players from the other team occasionally to get a job done.
Now, you met David Lindley, right?
Yeah, a few times. Yeah, because I've been on festivals out here and in the States, in Canada and stuff that he's played on. Just sort of brief interactions, side of stage or backstage or whatever. Great guy, really friendly, open guy. It's funny actually because like I got him to sign. I got him to sign a lap steel of mine when I was on a festival out here in Australia, the Blues Fest at Byron Bay. It's a pretty big festival, and he was out here with Wally Ingram, and so there's a few of us guitar players who were like, "Oh, Lindley," and so we were all kind of hanging around side of stage, and
Yeah.
and I went. He had a signing, and so I thought, well, I'm not going to bother him backstage about this, but he's got a signing, so I'll just stand in line with this Supro lap steel and go, "Hey, man, sign my lap steel." And he's like, "Oh, these are great. These are great." And he took a look at it, and I had these. You couldn't buy them at the time. They're kind of back now, but Labella are making them again. But they're these nylon tape wound strings. So they're like jazz strings, really. They have like a round wound steel string inside a flat nylon black tape, all the bass strings. And so he's gone to sign it. He's looked at it and he goes, "Where'd you get those strings?" I was like, "Oh, I found an old shop out of Western Sydney that in a warehouse had these boxes of these old stock of strings. I found them there." And he goes, "Oh, Rye would kill for these." It's like, well, he won't have to. I mean, I'll see what I can find and I'll send them to you. You can pass them on, man. Like he's given me plenty. So I found what I could. I kind of oversold it a bit. I was like, there was loads of them. And then I went back there and there was like only about, 12 packs. I was like, oh man, I was hoping I'd be able to send, via David, like the idea of sending via David Lindley to Ry Cooder, like a bunch of these strings that he would like to use for certain things, was a great thought. And in the end, I had to sort of send him this, 12 packets and like a little note saying, "Sorry, I didn't find as many as I thought." Because, he was saying there's a fretless electric guitar that Rye uses on soundtracks and things, and that's what he uses, and he couldn't get them at the time. But it was funny, because when he's like, "Where did you find those strings?" And when I sort of told him, I said, and on this instrument, they just have a sound that's different to anything else, and I really like that quality. It's so like when you turn the amp up and it's overdriven, it's like the notes, instead of going sort of bong, the bass notes would kind of go thun. It just had a different front edge. It's all about that front edge of the note when you pick it. What that transient front edge of the note sounds like is such a big part of a guitar sound, I've found. And he sort of goes, yeah. Another one to look for is Monel steel, if you ever find those. It's like he kind of recognized, oh, you're one of these ones who's obsessed with this shit. Here's another one for you. Here's another, because at the time, Monel steel strings are back now, of course, as well. But at the time, this was like 1999 or 2000 or something. No one was making those retro Monel steel string sets at the time. And so he was like, look out for those. It was funny, He's like, oh, you're a nerd too.
Oh man, but that's when you're talking with that guy, that's the conversation you want to have. You want to nerd out about the thing.
Yeah, with someone like him, yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's nice, those little moments, like getting to do a little bit of shop talk without, pestering someone is good.
Was it so I guess kind of like while all this is happening and like you started playing in cover groups, but you were also writing your own tunes and like
with actually playing in those cuts. Sorry, I didn't mean to
no
there.
Go for it.
Yeah. I mean, a big part of learning how to play for me was in the early days playing in these cover situations. There's one I can remember, like musically it was pretty cheesy. It was like the bass player would sing. It was a bass player and me, and he had a drum machine, and it would just be in these little bars, in a lounge at a nightclub and stuff, and we'd just be doing, Lying Eyes by the Eagles and Sister Golden Hair and things like that. But I hadn't heard any of these songs. I just said, yeah, I can do this gig. And so I turn up and it's him and a drum machine and he's singing and playing bass. And I was playing electric guitar. And so I was the only instrument that played chords and melody. And I hadn't heard any of these songs. So I just had to listen to what was going on with the melody and the bass and just find something on the spot so it's not like these are jazz chord changes or anything. Yeah. They're pretty standard diatonic things, but I had to just listen and find what the hell the next chord was meant to be. It's like, oh, it's not that quickly. Oh, it's a B minor, G to B minor there. Okay, not G to C. And so, it actually really helped kind of solidify the ear training. I guess it sort of combined the ear training that I'd had with those early improvising clarinet lessons into where things were on the guitar neck. Like I was doing all this playing in my bedroom, but I was playing along with records that I loved and making stuff up and things, but it was over things that I could hear in my head where the chords were going because I knew these songs. You'd listen to them a lot. These were songs I'd never heard, and there was like a whole night of them almost, and I just had to find what the hell was going on and do it without getting fired. So that did actually really help my playing a lot, even though it was like not the sort of thing I would want to hear.
Did you get the gig again? Did you get hired again?
Oh, yeah. We did that for a while. Yeah.
Awesome.
It was great for me because at the time, I was 17 or 18 and I was earning like $125 for a Friday night. That was like, in whatever it was, the late 80s. That was like, I was off to the races, man. I was going off and buying all sorts of guitar pedals and things and all the records I could carry. It was awesome. A record, an LP was like $7 Australian at the time. So you made, $125 cash. Man, I was into the record store the next morning and it was, and ordering things and it was great.
So with that, is that kind of like how song kind of like the structure of songs like came to you as well? Like through that type of experience and training of like...
No, it probably rubbed off a little, but that was more something that I would say helped me with my playing. Mm-hmm. Those, like say just having to really refine your ear quickly. Songwriting influence probably, it really started... I wrote songs, but I don't think that I was up to much that anyone would want to hear or that I certainly would want people to hear for a while. It was more when I started playing solo and traveling around on my own and recognizing when I started playing solo gigs that some of the songs that I'd been playing with I had my own band. It was an electric band, me and another guitar player and a rhythm section. And we did my songs. Then I started playing solo gigs and I was like, it's really hard to make these songs sound any good. It's like it started dawning on me slowly. They're not very good. The songs aren't that good. That's why you can't make them work without all of this extra sonic stuff going on. It's like if it stands up in a really stripped back way, then it's solid. And these just weren't that solid. And I just started getting more. I'd always been into, Dylan and things like that. And I guess part of it was doing these long drives. Like Australia's a big place. It's kind of like touring Canada. There's a lot of open stretches, not a lot of people out there. And you just have to, if you want to go and play to people, you got to drive a long way and get to them. So I'd be doing that on my own. No one else, could tell me what to turn on and off on the car stereo. So I'd just be listening to things and recognizing what really worked. And I guess that was where the songwriting started, through necessity, necessity being the mother of invention. I was going to go playing these solo gigs and I wanted to do my own songs. So I'd better start writing some things that can actually stand up without all the extra people playing. Mm.
Then so at that point you've already decided to kind of commit to doing this by yourself. And
yeah.
And
I didn't think I was going to like it at first. I didn't think I was going to like it because I knew I'd be out there just on my own and I had a lot of, issues with self-confidence and self-loathing and things like that. So I thought, oh man, this is going to be a nightmare. But I found that it actually was good.
Yeah? Just like reaction, or it just felt good?
Being out there on my own and with my own company, after having only ever traveled around with a car full of other people, other guys, So just being on my own, I quite liked the meditative state you can get into on a 12-hour drive on your own. It's quite good.
No, I totally relate to that, man. Like to the long drives, the solo gigs out to like trying to make it all happen yourself and like figuring like what's working with a crowd and that kind of positive, like kind of critical feedback for yourself of how can I make this better? And like
a lot of negative feedback.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of that. I think you called them the torture tapes. Like,
oh man, well that's all I was talking about with the audience, because I mean finding an audience, it was slow going, man. Somehow I just had a stubbornness. I was like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pander to, it just because there's 15 people here on a Wednesday night in Grafton, New South Wales, and they're telling me they want to hear some Creedence songs or whatever. I'm not going to just do that because that'll make my life momentarily easier.
Yeah.
Something in me was stubborn enough to go, nah, you don't like it, feel free to leave. Sure, the bar owners weren't happy with that mindset, but that's where I was at, stubborn or something, Yeah.
But no, that's the only way you can like figure out how to like try to make your songs work. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And like, oh man, I read your book, and like
okay.
The Blood Money chapter, that's another chapter that really resonates home. Like I've played so many awful gigs and like, but not as crazy as some of the ones in Australia. It's amazing to me how many fights like you had to dodge as a musician. That's absurd.
It seemed like it was, I just kind of, I mean, maybe it's the era too. I mean, I'm 54. When I was growing up, corporal punishment was normal. And then I started playing shows and I wanted to play guitar. I wanted to play gigs and play in bands. So I was driven to do it. And so walking into an environment where, fist fights would happen in front of you and people would have fights and throw billiard balls at each other and smash windows and things. And, that it was like, I mean, I certainly remember feeling a bit scared by these things, but at the same time, just going, oh, this is what happens. I mean, it's crazy. It almost felt like you were automatically desensitized. In that era, it felt like it's like the Wild West or something. It just felt like, oh, okay, that's what happens. And afterwards we'd be like, how was that? It wasn't like, man, that was really dangerous and outrageous. We were just kind of like, oh yeah, you see that? That guy threw a billiard ball right at the other guy and he managed to dodge it and it smashed a window. And we weren't like going, that was cool.
Yeah.
We weren't going, that was awesome, yay for violence.
Yeah.
But we were just sort of like, it seemed to be like, oh, that's the way it is. It sounds awful. And it was. I mean, the very first time I went out of town from my hometown to play a gig, I saw someone get killed right in front of me. The guy got king hit and sort of pushed over from behind and he fell onto the side of the pavement and split his head open. And I found out later he died. It's a shocking thing to have in front of you. And that was the first time I did it and I kept doing it. So, I mean, it's not like I was, like a sociopath who didn't care about it. It was more like, oh, wow, geez, okay, I better keep my eyes open, when I'm playing in these places. I better, watch my back.
Well, yeah, because it's traumatizing to be like.
Yeah, I can still remember it clear.
Yeah.
It's like I can picture that in my mind. I mean, even when I didn't know that the guy had died, it was really shocking. I mean, we were just like, and I remember also being struck by the fact that the guy's friends were all so out of it that they watched him fall like that. And it was a sickening sound, his head hitting this big jutting up piece of concrete right in the middle of his forehead.
Jesus.
And it was this horrible sound. And his friends stood around sort of gawking at it. And we were there going, someone call an ambulance, get someone, run inside, get them to call an ambulance. Like there's like 5 of his friends and about 20 other people all just sort of standing around going, oh. That was also fairly shocking.
Yeah, no, that's insane. Like, did I mean, and another thing I really relate to, your like, just, at least a little bit of your journey is like, from what I understand, you don't drink, and
Yeah.
like that's something I always found myself doing as well. And there's not a particular reason, like it's just never been my thing, but
Yeah.
is kind of experiencing insane moments like that maybe one of the reasons you found yourself not wanting to be one of those guys kind of like, what do we do, you know?
It certainly doesn't encourage you to imbibe. No, you sort of, I mean, if that's the environment that you're in, you see a lot of that stuff, and people coming up and trying to pick a fight with you because you're an interloper in their town and you're playing a gig, and some guys would just be drunk and kind of, maybe they smelled that I wasn't a sport guy, and so they just come up and want to pick a fight with you. You seemed like, I was a little dude as well, had really long hair, and so there was like an easy target. And so you see that stuff, and it doesn't encourage you to start doing it. But I also don't remember thinking people who drink are all idiots and violent pricks, because I knew plenty of people in the music scene who all drank, and I didn't think less of them, and they weren't violent pricks. They were, great people. So it's not quite as simple as I saw the behavior of people who drank and went, no, I'm not having any of that, and being judgmental about it. Like I said, the behavior of some of the audiences in these places didn't encourage you to get involved. But I think it was more, like you said, just kind of the way it happened. And once I'd been in, playing gigs for 6 months or so and hadn't started drinking, I just kind of, when that band split up, I just kind of continued on the way I started, and it just wasn't part of the mix. I mean, some people occasionally will say, oh, you don't drink. Wow, well done. That's, it's quite an achievement in the music business. And it's not really. Like, to my way of thinking, if you don't start, then not starting every day is simple. That's just, you're just doing the same thing you've always done. It just doesn't involve that. Quitting, now that's hard.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people quit, and that's admirable, and that's an achievement. But it's not to say that if you drink, you've failed. And it's not to say that if I don't drink, I've succeeded at something. It's just, I mean, I don't even say I never will. It just, at 54, it becomes increasingly unlikely with every passing year. But, I don't really look at it like bad people do that. Well, I certainly don't look at it at all like bad people do this, and if you do the right thing, you'll be like me. No one likes that kind of wowzer, including me. I don't like that kind of thinking either.
Yeah, well, no, I definitely agree with that, because I also it's, for me, it was just never a thing. Like, so I totally relate to I never started. So it's not, because I get people telling me that too. Oh, good for you. I'm like, oh, I cool, yeah. But the other thing,
some people think it's weird too.
Right,
some people find
that's the other thing I was going to bring up. Like, some people are like, I don't trust you. You know what I mean? I'm like,
I don't trust you. Yeah.
Like,
You're a cop. Like something about it. It makes some people uneasy, and you can't help that though.
Yeah,
I kind of understand. They're probably thinking you're judging me, or they think that it's kind of confusing to people, I think, if they go, oh, when did you quit? And you go, oh, no, I just never started. They're like, what's that about? I've had people occasionally, when I've got to know them a bit, but I go, what's that about, man? Like Kelly Joe Phelps. You ever hear that guy? Mm-hmm. He was, I did some touring with him. And when we got to know each other a bit, he did actually, we were hanging out, my wife and he and I were hanging out in Iowa, and they were both we just got engaged. And so we're having this big celebratory hanging out, and my wife was drinking quite a lot, and so was he, and I was not. And he eventually at one point went, so not drinking, what's that about? I was like, why are you like slightly suspicious of it? And he's like, yeah, kind of. Yeah, so it was good. I appreciated it. It hadn't occurred to me that people might be like that. He just expressed it very straightforwardly, and we just talked about it. And he was satisfied with my answer when I went, oh, yeah, no, it's not like judging people who do. It's just, this is how it happened. And he's like, oh, okay. And then he was relaxed about it. But it was illuminating, because it hadn't occurred to me really that people might find it uncomfortable being around someone who never drinks. But
right. But
like Popeye says, I am what I am.
But yeah, no, it's definitely a weird circumstance. But I think like as far as like being
It's
able,
unusual, yeah.
yeah, you know, and like, but you know, and like you said, not to judge anyone who does or doesn't, like, but I gotta imagine just like also like kind of side effects of just like kind of better vocal health and like just like being able to get to the next gig at the end of the night a little quicker. It may better like in those situations.
There are benefits, yes. There are benefits.
One album I wanted to talk about before asking you about this new album, and I'm probably gonna get the title wrong, but it was the first record I found of yours, Jan Jan.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Okay.
John, I
John
think you
John.
pronounce it. Yeah.
Like I found that record. Actually, I found that from the library, and I think that was before I realized who like going down the rabbit hole. And I was just like, this is an incredible record. I've never heard slide guitar like this, and like I just became obsessed with this record. And like, can you kind of like so? From what I understand, you guys were touring as that group, right? Or how did
We
that
did do some
project?
touring, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that project was with Mamadou Jabate, who's a Malian kora player who lives in the States, and Bobby Singh, who's a friend of mine who's like Mumbai born, but lives in Australia and plays tabla, and myself. And there was a recording, Mamadou was out in Australia and Bobby was playing in a percussion trio called Circle of Rhythm with two other great percussionists, a guy named Ben Walsh, who plays sort of modified drum kit with, he's a sticks player, but he plays all sorts of stuff. He's like a real freak. And Greg Sheehan, who's a great drummer as well, but he would play a lot of percussion with, like, say, he'd play tambourines, stretching the skin and doing stuff like that. And so the three of them played opening for Mamadou, and I came to the gig, and this idea was floated on a day off on Mamadou's tour. Maybe we'll go into the studio and record some things to see what we get. So we did like about 5 pieces, and it just seemed we did one with the three of the percussionists and Mamadou and myself, and then we recorded a few other sort of starts of some things, but it quickly seemed to settle into this trio of me and Mamadou and Bobby on tabla. It seemed like the other two guys went, I don't know if there's room for what we're doing in here. You guys should just record this piece with the three of you. Then the next one, we'd start working it up, and they'd go, yeah, this feels like just a trio one again. So at the end of that day, we had 5 pieces of music recorded, 4 of which were with just Mamadou, myself, and Bobby. So then when Mamadou came out, next time we organised to do some gigs with the three of us. And we thought, well, we've got an EP done, I guess, but it would be good to just record some more pieces and make it a full-length album. So that's what we did. So we did a few tours. It became kind of unworkable at a certain point, but I still continued to work with Bobby on various things. He's even on one of the songs on this new record, and I've got another band with Bobby and a couple of Rajasthani guys. So, I love working with that guy. And Mamadou was great to play with too. Like, the kora is such a beautiful sounding instrument. It's like you could easily believe that if you hear that instrument, you go, well, this must be the sort of instrument that if you get to heaven, you hear this. It's just incredibly beautiful, cascading quality of the way they play. It's just beautiful. So yeah, pretty quickly thought, well, if he's going to be playing regular guitar might work, but probably slide guitar is the one that will kind of fit nicely in there, because it's a contrast. The way that melody happens on the slide is very different to the way melody happens on the chorus. So it will be it'll keep it divided enough.
I was wondering that because like it fits really perfectly, and like it kind of like just how you approach kind of singing on the slide guitar with the kora. It's a really like beautiful blend. So like I guess kind of adapting to that style, did it come easy to you?
Well, you've got, yeah, something's gone, lights have gone off.
Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah. Yeah, it's just, again, about like listening to the piece of music and trying to find something in your vocabulary that will be complementary to what's going on. And okay, so Mamadou's very, very proficient on the kora. there's a lot of covering the low end and playing melody at the same time. Okay, so we've got this going on. It's kind of like that thing earlier I was talking about of like playing in a band with two other guitar players. Well, there's no point just playing the same thing these other guys are doing. Find something else. Find something that sits in between those parts or sits above those parts, but doesn't get in the way of the vocals and whatever. So you're just listening to what's there and thinking, okay, if he's doing that, maybe if I do this, it'll complement it. So it's just that process. Easy. I didn't find it especially harder than any other setting like that. It's just different each time. It's a different challenge fitting the acoustic slide guitar in with the kora as opposed to in with an Indian sarangi or something. There's each thing takes up a certain type amount of sonic ground, and that's something to fit around rather than compete with. So you just try to find something that fits. A lot of it's the tone of the instrument too, like going for a certain tonal quality that will, again, wrap itself around the other or sit in or have the other wrap around you, just tighten it. So if something's covering a big, deep bass and a sparkly treble, then find something with a solid mid-range that will sit in amongst that, and each thing will have its space.
It's one of my favorite records. That's such a
thanks, man. That's kind of a rare record too. That's hard to find. It's kind of out of print, and so it shouldn't hats off for finding it.
It's such a good, but and it always kind of baffled me. Like, okay, how would one find like melodies to play with that off the chord? Like, it's such a, there's already a lot going on, but how you explain it makes it your approach to it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you view the kora like a piano, not to compare with these people in my case, but if you have McCoy Tyner playing piano, and then if you had Miles Davis playing trumpet, well, they would find space for that melody. Like sonically, there's space there, and there's also in terms of the roles, like McCoy Tyner will be doing a whole lot of stuff, and Miles Davis's trumpet will just sort of push through that with the melody. So there are ways of doing it. Just you just conceptually approach it like that. Like I said, not to pretend that I'm on a level with Miles Davis. I'm just saying that that's the type of thing that I use as an example and will lean towards in my mind.
In my opinion, you're pretty close, man.
Yeah. Well, I'll send you the check for that.
But okay, so kind of like to bounce another topic here, like to go back to songwriting and like the idea of songwriting with other people, like. So I can relate to that long meditative state where you can kind of like get a topic and kind of write a story, and like you do an amazing job of like taking a song on the lap steel and being able to accompany yourself in a way just like Dylan would with guitar or just like piano, and just build this atmosphere and carry this narrative. Like examples like I'm trying to remember the exact title, but I Don't Like It When He's Here. About the
I don't like him being in here. Yeah,
right,
that's straight guitar piece.
Like that takes me right to like that's such beautiful songwriting and how it's such appropriate support for the song. You kind of going back to what we were saying before, like supporting the song more than the flash. But like these incredible songwriting chops, and you have them just like throughout all your records, and then to work with other people. So I gotta imagine especially with the context of More Life, where it's like you're working with other people who are in far locations and who are running their own schedule. Like, as far as like, and you with this record, you wrote with everybody before, which is already like doubling the work as opposed to being like, hey, can you record this part? You know what I mean? Like, that's way more accessible. But you did like the true like partnership route of it. So I guess
that was part of the sort of the MO for the record. I like to have a rule for a record, just one rule, and you can bend it if need be. And the rule for this record was it's going to be new songs co-written with the person that I'm singing them with. It's not going to be, and we bent it with one song. There's a gospel standard on there that I ended up doing as a second song with Hat Fitz and Cara Robinson. But so that was where, there's always room to bend the rule somewhat. But otherwise we stuck to the rule. Each person that I did a collaborative recording with, we wrote the song together.
So I guess as far as that process of writing with somebody, do you like, do you find that easier? Do you find that more challenging? Like, were there lessons kind of gleamed from each writing session?
Oh, well, yeah, you always learn things from people you collaborate with. Like, I mean, whether you sort of take it in right at the time and go, oh, I'm going to remember that, that doesn't necessarily always happen, but it always changes something about you, the process. Um, it makes it, for me, it kind of, the appeal of it is it makes it easy to enjoy the work, like the outcome of it. You record your own stuff, and there's always sort of misgivings about the sound of yourself. Like, I think, it's hard to enjoy your own music. Do you find that?
Yeah.
It's like,
Because you get hung up in your mistakes. Like,
yeah, and you even get just hung up on reservations about your own sound. I mean, I do anyway. It's like, oh God, that's just my shit, again. It's, like I hear it all the time. That's the thing. I hear it every gig I play, every note I do, every word I sing, I hear it. And so it's easy to get tired of the sound of yourself. So when you get excited about making a new record, but then pretty quickly after you've finished, you're like over it. It's like it's time to just keep moving forward and just don't think about that. The material's there. You can reinvent the material for gigs. I'll listen to old records sometimes to learn a song. If I sort of think it'd be fun to pull that song out, or someone requests it and I think I can't remember it, I must pull it out and listen to it and learn it. And I'll sometimes go, oh, man, you're playing that too fast, man, or whatever,
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but with this, the appeal of it is that I'm a fan of the work of all of these people that I'm collaborating with. And so it's easy to enjoy it afterwards, because even if I have a reservation about something I've done, it's at least 50% the content and the sound of it is them. And I can just enjoy, well, I like the sound of them, so I can just kind of focus on that. As far as the writing goes, yeah, there was a whole bunch of different processes. Like, Kerry Simpson on the title track, she sent me a set of words, and I came up with a musical idea for that. And that was how that one worked. On the two songs with Don Walker, I sent him words and he came up with a tune for those. On the song with Susanna Espy, she lives very close by to me, and I went round to her house with the start of an idea. It's often a good way to go with collaborative, co-writing, is to have the start of something you don't feel precious about, that you've just taken to a certain point, and that it's, you've got maybe a verse and half a chorus, or, even like two halves of verses or something, or even just a title or a riff, but just something that's a start. And so I had these, like about 2.5 verses worth of lines, and they seemed to be okay. And I went round to her place and she goes, oh, I've made a start on something. Do you want to have a look at it? And I was like, oh, yeah, I did too. Let's play yours first. And she played it, the idea that she had, and it sounded like a chorus. It sounded like a chorus to these lyrics that I had. So that was really, and then we just finished it. We came up with a bridge and we finished the verses that I had, like they needed another half verse. And it was like really seamless. They just sort of completely went together. So that was really fortuitous, that the ideas that we had already started on just fit together really naturally. But yeah, it could be any number of ways. I didn't really approach it with that going into a room and just having nothing prepared and each of us just coming up with something on the spot. I didn't do that one just because that can be slow going, and it can be fine to do that if you've got a relationship with co-writing with someone already. Like Susanna Espy and I, we have written songs together that way in the past, and so that could have been the way it could have worked this time. But with other people, it can, if you haven't written with them before, it can be unnerving if you go into a room and there's a blank piece of paper in front of each of you and you just feel like you've got to fill that space somehow. Because get something started. This is awkward. If we sit here for 10 minutes and don't come up with anything, that feels like 2 hours. So it can be a little bit unnerving. So I didn't go into any of these co-writing situations without something started, or the other person did first. Like, say, with Kerry Simpson, we talked about it and then she very quickly sent me an email with a bunch of words. So she just leapt into the fray with something already started, and that kicked it into gear.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that would definitely, like, because approaching it when you're trying to put it all in that moment really kind of makes a lot of pressure of that moment. Like, this is the time we have, you know what I mean? We got to get something, not that it has to happen.
Yeah, and you also start to think this other person's going to be thinking, why haven't he says he can write songs. How come he hasn't done anything yet? You know, it can be a bit like that. You can get worried about that stuff. And that, of course, as soon as you're thinking about whether or not it's working, it's not working.
Right.
The more you think about, the more you question whether it's working, the less likely it seems that it will work. So, yeah, I kind of top loaded it, or sort of kicked it off each time, like took something in that was already on the go or someone else did, you know. So that helped move it along.
So like on that, do you have like a routine you do for songwriting? Because you got like 30 albums worth of stuff, and like that's that in multiple bands. Like, not do you have like a practice you do every day? Do you just have like a thought collection? Or do you find yourself just notating poetry? Is there like kind of an approach to songwriting for you to keep this kind of output, or even just the practice of the craft?
There isn't one approach. I don't have a particular routine, and sometimes I think maybe I should, because it wouldn't be bad. But I have certain techniques that I'll employ if I feel like I've gone a stretch without coming up with anything, because it always feels like it improves the gig if there's at least something new in amongst it. Like if you have one new song, then it seems to shed new light on all of the other material around it. It kind of gives everything a bit of a lift. So I'm always on the lookout for the next song, but it might be a year before I come up with anything, and I'll start to think, God, maybe that's it. Maybe there isn't any more. I'm done. So there's certain things that I do to encourage it to start flowing again. And one of them is, if I'm feeling bored with the material at hand at a gig, then I might just, if I've been listening to something that I'm really enjoying, I might just decide, okay, at tonight's gig, I'm going to play this song. You know, maybe I've been listening to an 80s era Dylan record, and I'll think, I wonder if I can remember all the words to the song Foot of Pride. That's a lot of words, but I love that song. I'll see if I can pull that out at the gig tonight, and I'll just listen to that song a couple more times and then turn it off, and I'll be driving, and I'll just see if I can recite the words to myself in my head. And then it's like, yeah, I think I can remember all of those, and then I'll just play it at the gig. And that will kind of give the gig a bit of a lift, because you just get it something new to play and you're kind of keyed up about it. As far as writing goes, it's almost like turning on a tap, or the other analogy, I guess, would be like tuning in a radio station. Like the tap analogy, it works for me because sometimes I'll just make myself write something, or I'll take out some old lyrics. Like I keep scraps of things around. I have, like a folder full of things, and I pull them out from time to time, and a lot of it I'll look at and go, yeah, I can see why I didn't bother with that. It's just not saying anything to me. Occasionally there might be a line or two in there, though, that's like, oh, those are kind of interesting. The rest of it's crap, but those couple of lines sound like, if I take them off that page and put them on another page, I'll keep that page, and then I'll have just those two lines on it. And I'll sort of look at that stuff and then look at those two lines and go, okay, make yourself come up with something for it. Just force yourself to write something. It doesn't mean that you necessarily will use the song you write. And that's where I think of it like running a tap. It's like you turn the tap on, and if it hasn't run for a while, sometimes you get a bunch of brown water, and you don't want to drink that. But you just turn the tap on, get the brown water out of the way, and eventually the tap keeps running and you get some nice clean water. So you might get something through the process of actually writing that song that's maybe not that great, and you've forced it to happen. But it's sort of, I think it reactivates a circuit in your brain that you've let kind of die down a bit, and then you flip the switch back on, you run the tap, the brown water's out of the way, and something starts happening. And that's, again, the other analogy with the radio station. It's like kind of by making yourself write something, forcing yourself to finish something that you might not even use, you're just kind of tuning the station in. You've let the dial drift. You've traveled a distance. You've gone out of range from that station. it's time to see if there's anything out there. And so by writing, force yourself to write a song or two. You're just tuning the dial. Yeah, the song that you've written, it might just be more static, but then you start fine tuning the dial, and it's like, oh, what's that? Oh, if I keep moving in this direction, I'm going to move towards that. There's a flicker of something there. So you can kind of reactivate the circuits in your mind and start picking up on things. I remember Tom Waits saying about writer's block. He said, just because you're not throwing your line in the river doesn't mean the fish aren't out there.
Those are all great analogies, and Tom just killing it with another amazing written line.
He's pretty good with the words.
I really enjoyed your Tom. You did all of God damn, I'm totally blanking. Bone Machine. Like that was the first Waits record I got into. And
same.
Yeah. It's like one of the the rhythm and what he plays on that, and I loved your recreation of that.
Yeah, that was like a record store in Melbourne was doing a whole summer of the classic album series, and people were just encouraged to go and play a whole album of someone else's. And I said, they asked me to do it. And I said, I'll do Bone Machine by Tom Waits, because I love that record. And it was the first record of his I got into as well. And it just is still my favorite of his. It just really knocked me out. And so in typical disorganized fashion, I thought, I've listened to that record a lot. I know it. When it gets to the week of that gig, I'll concentrate on that. And so it got to like 3 days before I was meant to do it. And I went out into my garage and went, okay, I'll put this record on and I'll just sing along with the songs first. And then I realized to my horror that there were a few songs on there that I had never really sort of glocked what he was singing. Like I never really sort of got onto picked up on all of the words. I didn't know what he was singing in all the words of All Shook Down. I didn't know what all the words were to In the Colosseum. I liked the sound of the tracks, and I hadn't really focused on all of the lyrics that much. And then I was like, ooh, I don't actually know what all these words are. I better get the booklet out and have a look. And it's like, oh shit, yeah, there's a lot of words in this song. When's the gig? Oh, it's it's Thursday and the gig's on Saturday morning. Oh, good. So I suddenly was really cramming to try and remember all of those songs, because I just sort of glibly thought, I've listened to a lot. I know these songs. They'll all be in there. And to my horror, I discovered that there were a good 3 songs that I didn't have any of the words in my head apart from the title. And I had to just find out what the words were and then learn them. But yeah, there was a lot of it that was in there. But yeah, and again, if you're not concentrating on ever singing the stuff yourself, I don't want to grow up. It's like, yeah, I can sing along with it if it's playing, but if you had an isolated microphone, if I was singing along with it before then, it's like, yeah, you're not getting 2/3 of the lyrics of those songs. You're only getting the last half of the line. That's no good if you're covering the song. You can't just remember the last half of a line, man. And so there's a lot of cramming for that gig.
Well, it paid off. It was a real. That's the first time I've really seen you loop stuff, as opposed to kind of atmospheric loops. I don't do a lot of rhythmic. In fact, I hardly ever do rhythmic looping that's in time. I just figure that's been done. That's been done a lot. I don't need to do that. Well, and you could pull it off without it. You've been doing that, so I totally get why I'd be like, eh. And another thing, I've always your vocal approach compared to Tom Waits is a much different vocal approach.
Yeah.
You use a lot of your head voice. Is that something as far as as far as the guitar journey, the vocal journey is it's a real different kind of journey. It's one that's really at least for me, we know what a good singer is, right? And what compared to guitar, when you're playing guitar, if I hold 3rd fret E string, it's always going to be a G note, Yeah. But when you're singing, you have to hear yourself back. There's this different way to kind of learn that instrument.
Yes.
So can you kind of share a little bit of your vocal journey? Was it an easy?
Well, it's funny, because I play with Indian musicians a fair bit and playing slide guitar where it's it's not, you got frets there, but you're not really beholden to the frets because you're playing with the slide. So it's a non-tempered instrument. And I hear sometimes people go, well, it can take getting used to, something like Indian music, because in Western music, there's no microtonal music. And I'm thinking, that's not really true, man. I haven't seen anyone with a fretboard or a keyboard in their throat. It's all down to controlling microtones. I mean, it's very easy to hear microtonal music at play in Western society and music. All you need to do is to go to a bad open mic and hear someone singing out of tune. That's a bad use of microtones right there, So it's controlling the instrument with your voice. And learning how to sing. It is a journey. There's been a few significant things along the way for me. I mean, early on, I was into guys like, Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, voices like that. And I loved, when I heard their music, I was like, oh man. I remember distinctly listening to Muddy Waters and thinking, I would love opening my mouth and having that sound come out. That must just be incredible. But that's not the instrument that I have. And I've never liked the idea myself. I'm not going to judge anyone for what they do, but I've never liked the idea for me of trying to mimic that, trying to sort of sing blacker to pretend somehow that you have soulfulness. I figured it felt really corny to me putting on a voice and trying to sing like an African-American singer. I'm a white guy from Australia. It just felt phony, and I never wanted to do it. So I never tried. And people's mileage will vary on this, of course, but hearing Neil Young's music on a vocal level was a really great thing for me, because it doesn't get much whiter sounding than Neil Young's voice. It's very white, and yet for me, it was still really soulful. On the best stuff, he has a very soulful quality to the way he puts a song across. And it didn't make me think, I want to sing like Neil Young, but it was very encouraging to hear someone who sounded really soulful as a white person without being apologetic about the whiteness of their voice. They just used the instrument that they had, and it made me think, oh, maybe I can do that in my own way. I don't have to worry about the fact that when I sing, it doesn't sound at all like all of these great black singers that I love. I don't have to mimic that. I just have to use what I've got and try and put across what I'm singing with the right intent, and it can be soulful. So that was really encouraging to me. That was definitely a point where I thought, oh, there's hope for me yet. Because before then I was just going, man, maybe the closest I could get to is Skip James, but I can't sing like that either, man. That's, blues music, especially the stuff that I love, that's vocal music, and it's African-American vocal music in my mind. That's they own that stuff. So I just had to find a way of, even with the idea of genre, likewise with genre, I thought, well, I'm not really, let's face it, I'm a white guy from Australia. It's going to be a mongrel music. Our mainstream culture is a mongrel here. So just accept that about what you do. Don't try and be religious about genre. Just don't be a fundamentalist with genre. Don't worry about orthodoxy there. I just thought just go with if the song feels like something that you can put across and stand behind, don't worry about what style of song it is. It just doesn't matter. And so likewise with my voice, it's like if you can just put a song across and get the right intention, then it can be soulful. It doesn't matter that you sound white as hell.
Was it? Well, I think that one, to find that authentic self, and to not, as long as the message and the song's getting out, I think that's a really honorable route to take. And with more life,
just be yourself. Be yourself.
Right. Which is, for a lot of people is really hard to do, man.
Certainly it doesn't make it easy to do, because like I said earlier, you hear yourself and you go, God, I still don't love the sound of that. I still wish I sounded more like Muddy Waters.
Right.
But I don't. I don't. So just live with it, dude.
And I think with I think with More Life, like with just your most recent release, like I think you really embody that, especially with the lack there of genre, and like how this album ebbed and flows everywhere. But every song is really well written, and all the musicality to it is really inspiring. And like
Oh, thanks. That's good to hear. You try to get those things going. Mm.
well, this definitely did. I have a couple more questions, and Jeff, I really appreciate it. You've been so generous with your time.
That's been good talking with you.
Well, thanks. Um, with this record, you did a tune with John Butler, and I guess you guys
Yes.
had a writing collab for a TED Talk. But as I was
Yes.
going through all your records to get ready to talk with you, there's a tune. I think it's called "Easy to Kill."
Yes. Yeah. Too easy to kill.
Too easy to kill, and it's a live. I heard the first cut of it was a live cut I heard on the album with the zebra on it.
Oh yeah, there was a bonus disc
Yes.
with that album. Yeah, that had a live thing with it. Yes.
And it goes into a Robert Johnson tune. Was
Yeah.
that a tune you guys worked on together, or was that just a live moment?
No, that was just a live moment. John was doing a show on the same bill with me at a venue, and I said, "Hey, why don't you get up during our set?" And that was the song that I got him to jam on. So yeah, "Too Easy to Kill" was a song off an album of mine in 1998. Yeah, the album was called Cedar Grove, and yeah, that was just a song of mine. And it's probably one of those songs like when John, bless him, he's never hidden that there's been a bit of influence from me on his style, but that's probably the closest that our music has gotten. Like that's probably the closest to John's trip that my music has sounded. So that might have been one of the things that was more influential, but he certainly has taken whatever influence he's taken from me and run with it off into his own area, which is really cool. It's very gratifying to hear that sort of thing when you go, wow, someone's listened to something of mine and then hasn't copied it. They've just taken that influence and run with it. That's cool. That's the way we all do it. Mm.
Well, because that's like a high energy tune, and like it's such a cool tune, man. And I hear what you're saying with that after like hearing some of his stuff, and then being like, oh, maybe that's a touching point there. That's why maybe I was gonna ask if that was one you collaborated with. But like, I guess like with working with someone who also kind of plays with instruments and open tunings, like when bringing something to the table, is it kind of like already with a music riff established? And like, do you decide?
Yeah, that song "Seek High," that was what it started with, was a musical, the melody in that riff and the chord changes and things, that was there. And then I was playing that and John sung the chorus hook over it. And then we was at the end of the day where we'd written another song together already. So at the very end of the day, I was still recording the songwriting session that we were doing. And I started playing that riff and said, oh, this is another thing that I've got. I like this musical idea, but I haven't got any words for it. And he just was listening to me do it, and he just started playing along. He had the banjo there and he was playing along with that because I was playing it on slides. So he was like, oh, I'll pick up the banjo, and he was picking a tuning for it, and he started playing along. And then he just sung that chorus. And then I listened to that and I was like, I like that. And then a whole bunch of words started coming to me. And so, I ended up writing a bunch of lyrics for the verses that just kind of grew out of John spontaneously singing that chorus idea. But yeah, it came out of the musical idea. Like the melody of that chorus idea was sort of contained in the riff that I had. Mm.
I mean, you can, when you play it, you hear it, like, but you only hear it after like it's existed. So, you know what I mean? Like that chorus
yes.
is clear once you've heard it before. But like,
yes, yeah.
So I guess maybe to kind of turn it another, like when you were writing your own music, like on your own, is there like do you kind of have like an instrument you have the song kind of set to? Like do you know, oh, this one's going to be one for the lap steel, or this one's going to be like for the banjo, or, what I mean? Do certain instruments bring out certain styles of writing for you?
It sometimes can be like that. sometimes, I mean, it's having the musical idea first is probably my least favored way of writing, because it just feels like sometimes these riffs and fragments of musical ideas sit around for ages before they find anything to go with them. Whereas if I write words first, it feels like it's easier or quicker, because if I get a set of lyrics that I like, you can just read them spoken and they've got a bit of a meter and a rhythm to them, and that can indicate a musical thing. And of course, the most fun one is if you're writing the lyrics down, you can hear the melody and the chords in your head. It's almost like you don't have to do anything. You're just hearing the thing. And that's always more fun because there's not much work. But it doesn't happen that often. So yeah. So if there's a riff sitting around, and if I like that riff and I end up, finding a use for it, it might be instrument specific. But other times I might sort of write the song with whatever's at hand, and then start thinking about it when it comes time to. I might play it. If I wrote it on just a regular guitar, I might play it a few times at a gig, and go, this song might actually work really well on the lap steel, and I'll transfer it over to the lap steel. And even after songs are recorded, sometimes I'll move them between the two. Like there's a song called Ravenswood that it works pretty much equally well on lap steel or on bottleneck guitar. It doesn't, even though there's chords shapes that I play with it on, if I'm doing bottleneck, it still transfers to lap steel pretty easily, and it can work equally well on either. So, sometimes it's not that clear cut, but it does happen though, where it's instrument specific as you're writing it. Does happen.
Because with someone like you who plays all these different instruments, and each one has their own tonality, I can see where that makes sense. And I've recently started, because I've always written songs by having the music first type of deal, having a chord progression, having a riff, having something, and found myself ad-libbing and finding words to fit a melody. But I've recently...
Yeah, that's a really legit way of doing it, yeah.
Well, I've recently tried doing the opposite, writing first and then doing that ad-libbing. And you brought up, there's this magic moment where it's super easy and it kind of fits, you know what I mean?
That's
you have the narrative, you don't have to worry about anything. It's there. It's just finding the canvas to put it on. But Jeff, thank you so much for all your time today. I'm a big fan of your music and your writing, and it's been an honor to pick your mind.
Oh, no problem. Really good talking with you. It's been a fun conversation.
Well, thank you, man.
No, it was really good, man. Sometimes you do an interview and the person you're talking with, it's like they've got a series of questions planned, and so you just answer one, and as soon as you've got to the end of your sentence, they go, right, and then into the next question. This has been an actual conversation, and you know what you're talking about, so it's been good.
Well, thank you, man. And I've been a big fan of your music for a long time, and have been... Oh, I
appreciate it, man. Thank you.
I've been really diving into trying to figure out how to, you're one of my guitar guys, so this is I've been trying to figure out how you do things, because to learn all these different instruments when I started writing and playing, it was super inspiring, and opened up that world of just opportunity, because when you learn standard,
it is fun it is fun to have these things, where you go, okay, yeah, this song's okay. Maybe if I just put the guitar down and pick up the bouzouki over here, and it might just sort of lift the thing and make it. It's all about sort of excitement and engagement, isn't it? At a certain point, you go, if I'm excited about playing this song, then it that will kind of carry it a lot of the time. The investment in it. If you feel like you're a bit flat and not feeling it, then it's hard to fake that. So having different sort of timbres at your disposal and different textures can be really fun. I mean, it would be great to be a bit more, confident and proficient on percussion. To be able to sort of go at a gig, I just put down a stringed instrument altogether, and you just pick up a hand drum and just sing a song just playing a percussion instrument. Tom Waits could do that.
Yeah.
He could play a gig with a guitar and a piano solo, and he could just have some pots and pans and a couple of bloody toilet brushes. And that if he wanted to, he could just start doing something on those and put a song across. That's, it's always nice to be able to open up the textures. Lindley was big for me with that. Seeing Lindley do these sort of gigs where it was just him and a percussionist, and he'd have, acoustic Weizenborns and a 12-string guitar, and a bouzouki and an oud, maybe a jumbush, the Turkish instrument. It's like, it's really cool because then over the course of a gig, you get every song or two, you get this whole change of timbre and the whole color of the gig changes. And so that was really illuminating too. Those sort of things are inspiring.
Totally. I definitely as a kid learning to play, to learn that your knowledge is accessible to something else. I remember learning the first, I know how to play ukulele kind of too. Oh my God. You know what I mean? And really and then to learn that it can be,
they're all kind of related.
Yeah.
Like anything that's a plucked stringed instrument, you kind of can almost view them as one instrument, and it kind of helps to in a way, instead of sort of thinking, oh man, how do I go to playing mandolin? It's so much smaller. And it's like, just sort of treat it like it's an extension of the same thing. And it'll be a lot of, the thing I can't do is, say Lindley could go to the bowing. My wife could do that. She plays guitar, but she can play fiddle as well. And it's like, man, that is a hard instrument it's a humiliating instrument when you, I've tried. It's right up in your ear too. It's like the loudest thing in the world, right next to you. It's louder for you than anyone else. And I'm sitting there going, God damn it, I play stringed instruments for a living. This is just the most unlistenable sound. Like, no one could hear this and think this guy knows anything about music. So it's very humiliating. Humbling instrument. I can't do the bowing.
I agree with. I've had that same experience. Like you're saying, it's right there, and you can't really see it.
It's horrific, and you can't not hear it. It's deafeningly loud in your ear. The worst sound in the world. It's like, man, this thing will put you on your knees.
But when it's done
that.
Right,
if everyone thinks, it's an incredible sound. It's a good thing to do if you're getting ahead of yourself going, man, I'm really bitching on this music stuff. Just, if you've never played the fiddle, just grab a fiddle, put it up to your ear, and you'll get brought back down to size quick smart.
Oh, and your guys' band, you and your wife's band's awesome as well, man. I know we didn't really talk about that, but your harmonies together, and that's a whole nother thing. Being able to harmonize with someone is such a
Yeah, I tell you, I've always loved harmony singing, but I took a lot that I learned from doing that high ace record with Alison forward into this record, because a lot of what made this record for me really a fun process and what really kind of put the cherry on top was, how are the voices going to fit together? First of all, are we going to be doing duets where we're swapping parts? Well, sometimes we would do that. But then even on those songs, there's going to be parts where it's harmony singing. And how can I make my voice, with its sort of set of limitations and a certain tonality, it's got to fit alongside, say, William Crichton's voice, which is really deep and resonant, but it's also got to fit alongside Susanna Espy's voice, which is a higher pitched and more sort of pure tone. Liz Stringer's voice as opposed to Don Walker's. It's very different voices. So, how's it going to work? And finding a way to make it work. I learned a lot about doing that from doing that high ace record with Alison, because that was all harmony singing, and these songs had unusual melodies. Like the high ace record was really like, there was no lead singer. Which one of us is doing the harmony part? Like, it could be either of us. In a lot of ways, those songs, like, I don't think me or Alison could really sing those high ace songs on our own. You kind of almost, the sound of the voice is the two voices together. It was so interlocked with the way we wrote the songs, was all with harmony in mind. And so, we had to find a different way of making our two voices fit in every one of those songs. Even though they were the same two voices, we had to find a different way of making them fit. And I learned so much to take forward into other things from doing that high ace album. And I definitely put a lot of that to work, singing with all these different voices on the More Life record. It was really a helpful thing to have gone through.
That's like to find that placement and make that work. It is a really challenging thing. And I think both those albums, you do a really good job of expressing that. But that's a cool takeaway coming from working with someone you know very well and write with, you know what I mean, to like be able to apply that skill. Because like when melodies are bouncing, it's really kind of hard to figure, you know, because the concept of just harmonizing seems pretty like on the point. Pick a third, pick a whatever, and do your bit there.
Yep.
But when a melody's ebb and flowing, it's hard to like hang on for the ride in that lane, you know.
Yes, and I mean, Alison, we both write songs on our own records, but we could have written conventional type of songs, but we used a weird writing process for that album. And so the whole thing was, I mean, we were in lockdown and we didn't even think it was going to be something that we weren't even planning to release it. We're sort of 2/3 of the way through before we said, oh, maybe this is an album we've been making. Maybe we should just, you know, put it out on just a sort of on Bandcamp or something, a low key thing. And then it ended up getting pressed up by someone. So it ended up sort of getting kind of elevated beyond what we pictured it. But so, you know, because we did it that way, it was a real kind of no limits exercise. We didn't really care. We didn't even care if we'd be able to do those songs outside of the studio. We did everything sort of piecemeal. It was that the songs were written and arranged largely on the spot as we recorded them as well. So, you know, we'd record a whole bunch of stuff and then we'd start, part of the writing of it was even in the editing and mixing of things. We'd start going, no, there's too much going on there. We need to mute some things. Let's see, what can we take? Yeah, that's better if we take that out. Actually, that'd be better if we take all of that out. You know, so a lot of it kind of was a real sort of process of sifting and revealing to get that Hiatus album written and recorded, just because we're just doing it for our own amusement, just to kill time in this sort of extent. We're in Melbourne, so it's like the longest lockdown in the world, and it felt like it. So, you know, we just found something to do that was an enjoyable way to kill time. And so it was good to come out at the end of that, having learned a whole bunch of stuff too that you can use going forward. Was a nice side effect of doing that album.
One, you know, another thing I wanted to ask about was like you have this technique of mixing that you mentioned in your book, lining up, like reamping these speakers and kind of setting them in the room.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I've only done that a couple of times. I did it on 2 records. It's not the sort of thing that I could even be bothered doing all the time. And it's. I mean, I don't want to over egg it either. Like, if it was something that was like so revolutionary that it's like, this is the best, I would just find a way to do it all the time. I haven't done it subsequently to a couple of records, so I don't want to try and sell it like that process was the be all and end all. It was a fun thing to do though, and it did end up with a good result. But yeah, the idea was, I guess it was mostly about finding a way to, after a bunch of records, to kind of re-engage with the mixing process and have a different way of looking at it and get excited about mixing by employing something really different. So having all the individual instruments reamped through a monitor speaker each and arranging those speakers around a stereo microphone like players was really good fun. Certainly, you know, at some point it's something I'll probably do again, but I can't guarantee I would. It's just, it was perfect for the second album I mixed on it. It actually made, you know, with that process, it actually made more sense. That was a Blue City album with the band Maru Terang, because we recorded it in India and we were sort of doing a festival and we had these rehearsals and they went really well. And we had sort of, I think, 3 or 4 days of rehearsals booked for us. After 2 days, we'd worked up more repertoire than we needed. And we all sort of went, God, it would be good, you know, we've got 2 more days before we've got to do this concert. It'd be good to see if there was a studio in town. Let's see if there's a studio in Jodhpur that we can get hold of and just go and just record an album. You know, we may as well, because, you know, 2 of the band lived in remote Rajasthan and 2 of us lived in Australia. It's not easy to coordinate getting together. So we just found a jingle studio, you know, and it was like really small rooms. Like there was 3 recording rooms, but the one that Bobby Singh was playing tabla in was super dead, carpeted walls, and he was sitting in it and there was room for him and his tabla and nothing else. It was like a little one glass panel that he could see through, and it was like a tiny room, like as big as a desk, and, you know, like a average kind of work desk in your office. That was the space he was sitting on,
man.
and there was walls around. So there was no ambience at all. And the room that the kartal player, Bunga Khan Manganir, he was in a room not much bigger with kartals. They're like kind of like castanets, but there's no join. They're very loud, piercing, rhythmic sticks that you clack together. And the combination of those two things together is really cool for the rhythm. And me and Arsene were in another room together, but it was also it was big enough that there wasn't too much spill between us, but even the spill, it was very dead. It wasn't like a reverby spill. So it was very dry. And so I got the recording. It's like, cool, we got this stuff down. But boy, it's really, really lacking in ambience. And so I thought, well, this is a good chance to use that. I'd done the last record I'd made with this mixing through speakers reamping technique. So I got hold of this big theatre in Melbourne and used it in there. And that was brilliant. That actually, for getting some natural ambience and dimension into that recording, that technique worked really well. So it kind of was a fun experiment the first time I did it. And the next time I did it, it was actually really functionally effective. So it's the sort of thing that that sort of scenario is where it could be employed again to sort of enliven. I've used it actually on some live recordings too. You can do that with a live recording where if you have like say a mono desk tape and it's super dry and you think, but that performance, it sounds sonically decent. It's just really dry and the performance is good. You can actually get a good sounding space, pipe that mix into the space and put up a stereo pair of mics that just capture the ambience of that room and then just mix it in. And it just makes it feel more like what it's like in a space again. So, it can be effective. But yeah, it was an unusual way to do it, using it with every instrument with its own speaker. It was fun.
But it's so cool. Like reading that, like when me and my friends first started messing around with recording, we had a buddy of ours who's taken it to like a career level now, and like reamping was a thing he brought up to us. And we're like, well, okay, sure. I'll play in here and we'll put it through a Vox amp and a Fender amp and we'll see what they sound, And like,
yeah, sometimes you get a sound that you go, this sounds good when we're tracking. And then later you go, oh yeah, it does sound good, but it would be nice if the texture of that guitar part changed, and then you could re-overdub the part. But if you've got a direct running, you could just reamp it through a completely different sounding amplifier and bang, there you've got what you wanted. Yeah.
But like, I've never like thought of it in that sense of like mixing it like that. So when I read that I was like, oh man, that's so ingenious. That's a great idea to, like how you said, bring more life to it.
Yeah. And just to sort of, but I guess mostly it was just, I'll have these little things where I'll think of stuff like that for effect, chains of signal chains with an effect, or, what might this sound like if I ran this instrument through this and get this kind of texture. It's really taking that kind of mindset of just experimental and fun to the next level and just doing a whole mix that way. It was mostly just, more than sort of an ingenious technique. It was more a playful technique. Like the way I think of it, it was a way of having fun with it. And that, I could have mixed both albums that I used that technique on. I could have got a good sounding mix using a traditional desk with effects and things like that. But this was fun. And so I think a lot of decisions that get made around music, a lot of the sort of high-minded, flights of fancy reasoning you could give for it of like, oh, well, I was thinking of this. You could really probably cross those out and just replace them with, it was fun. And that would probably explain it a lot, because we thought it would be fun, or we did that because it might be fun. That's a lot of it comes down to that still, I reckon.
I think, and I agree with that so much. And I also think, like, with instrumentation, kind of going back to what we're talking about with like songwriting and changing stuff like up that, I think that part of that's the whole reason people do what they do as well, because it's more fun to do it that way. Yeah. And it invokes that excitement, why not? Which is fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Why not, man? Sometimes you get a good result out of a painful, torturous process, but, you wouldn't choose that though, would you?
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for this conversation.
No problem.
This
Good
was so
talking with
great.
you.
I really appreciate it.
We kind of finished with a bunch of stuff. If any of that's usable, feel free to as well.
All
I don't mind.
For sure. I will, because I write out all these questions and then I put them in my phone. And then I don't want to look at my phone when I'm talking to you. I want to look at you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I'm kind of glancing, and like, those were some things I wrote down and forgot to bring up. So I really appreciate the extra time to touch upon those. So thanks, man.
No problem at all. Yeah, good talking with you. Thanks for that. Hey.
Likewise. And if
Till next time.
Yo, Spike Spiegel here. You just listened to Zig at the Gig podcast. Keep riding the bebop. See you, Space Cowboy. Bang.